The stark digital face of the watch on Ethan Hayes' wrist glowed 8:47 a.m. against the persistent Seattle drizzle. As he emerged from his sleek gunmetal gray Audi R8, the fabric of his bespoke Brioni suit a second skin against the damp air, he paid no mind to the impressed looks from pedestrians, his focus a laser beam on the glass and steel tower where his tech empire consumed the top 3 floors. At 28, Ethan had already conquered mountains most people only dream of climbing, a fortune measured in billions, a revered name in the Seattle tech scene, and a life that seemed plucked from the pages of a high-end lifestyle magazine. On this particular autumn morning, however, the gray, misty tableau of the city would be fractured by something that shattered his meticulously engineered routine. Just shy of the building's grand entrance, his gaze was snagged by a scene that stood in stark, brutal contrast to the surrounding affluence. A young woman, her posture rigid in a wheelchair, flanked by 2 small, identical girls, held a piece of cardboard, its edges softened by the damp. The chilly Puget Sound wind teased the girls' brown hair as they pressed close to one another, sharing a single jacket far too thin for the biting temperature. Ethan's stride faltered, an unconscious hesitation. There was something in the quiet, unyielding dignity of that woman that held him captive. Her eyes, a weary but profound green, met his for a split second, and Ethan felt a strange, uncomfortable prickle at the base of his neck. The girls, no older than 4, offered shy smiles to the hurried passers-by, their cheeks pink from the morning chill, their small fingers laced together in a bond that spoke of more than just a need for warmth. The woman didn't plead, didn't call out. She simply existed there, her presence hinting at a story etched in hardship. The sign in her hands trembled almost imperceptibly in the morning breeze. Please help a mother and her daughters. Any contribution is welcome. The stark simplicity of the message collided with the overwhelming complexity of the situation. Ethan observed, his fingers moving on autopilot to the inner pocket of his suit, finding his wallet. He extracted a $20 bill, a meaningless sum to him that might represent a small reprieve for them. As he approached the small group, he saw the girls straighten, their eyes lighting up with a kind of pure hope he seldom encountered in his world of venture capitalists and board members. "Thank you, sir." The woman's voice was a surprise, melodic and soft, a stark mismatch to her dire circumstances. "Harper, Hazel, what do we say?" "Thank you," the twins chorused, their smiles revealing the tiny, charming gaps left by recently lost baby teeth. Their smiles were authentic, free of the calculation and hidden agendas that were the currency of his business world. For a beat, he felt an urge to ask more, to understand how they had landed on this cold street corner, to offer a more substantial lifeline, but the years of corporate conditioning were a powerful reflex. He pulled back, gave a curt nod, and continued on his way. Inside the polished elevator, his own reflection stared back with an expression he didn't recognize. It showed a man of immense success, impeccably attired, yet his eyes held a new disquiet, a hairline crack in his armor of calculated indifference. All morning, through high-stakes meetings and multi-million-dollar negotiations, Ethan found his mind replaying the scene from the sidewalk. How could a woman so young be confined to a wheelchair? What had become of the girl's father? And why, out of the thousands of faces he passed daily in Seattle, had this one family managed to pierce the carefully constructed apathy he had spent years perfecting? In the boardroom, as his team discussed the acquisition of a promising AI startup, Ethan's gaze drifted to the panoramic window, to the city churning dozens of floors below. His eyes instinctively scanned the crowds, searching for 3 specific figures in the sea of umbrellas and trench coats. The presentation on the screen showed impressive growth charts, but his mind was stuck on that single, poignant moment on the pavement. "Mr. Hayes, your thoughts on the proposal?" His assistant. Brenda's voice sliced through his reverie. "I'm sorry. Could you repeat the last part?" he asked, shifting in his leather chair. But even as he forced himself to engage with the numbers and projections, his thoughts kept spiraling back to that encounter. There was something in that woman's eyes, not the pleading or despair he would have expected, but a strange fusion of resilience and resignation, as if she carried a secret the world wasn't prepared to understand. And those little girls, Harper and Hazel, with their unguarded smiles. How could they hold on to that joy in the face of such adversity? The day crawled by with an unfamiliar lethargy. Every meeting, every call, every strategic decision felt hollow and insignificant compared to the questions that now relentlessly haunted him. His empire of code and innovation, built with a single-minded and ruthless drive, suddenly felt devoid of any real substance. As evening finally draped itself over the city, Ethan found himself driving his Audi slower than usual toward his waterfront penthouse, his eyes sweeping the sidewalks, searching for a wheelchair and two identical little girls. But they were gone, leaving only the unanswered questions echoing in the vast emptiness of his mind. In his sprawling penthouse apartment, with a commanding view of Puget Sound, Ethan poured a glass of 50-year-old single malt, the amber liquid swirling in the crystal as he stared out at the city lights. His reflection in the vast window showed a man profoundly altered from the one who had stepped out of the sports car that morning. A subtle but undeniable shift had occurred. That night, lying awake in his king-size bed between sheets of Egyptian cotton, Ethan Hayes, the tech prodigy and cutthroat billionaire, could not sleep. For the first time in a very long time, all his victories and accolades seemed utterly meaningless compared to the image of those three souls on the sidewalk. In his world of algorithms and data points, that brief random encounter had introduced a human variable he had no idea how to compute. A week had passed since that moment on the sidewalk, but Ethan Hayes's routine was fractured beyond repair. His gourmet breakfast, usually served on the balcony overlooking the Sound, now tasted like ash. Between sips of single-origin coffee and bites of flaky croissants, his mind drifted back to the three figures he couldn't shake. The sincere smiles of the twins and the mother's haunted green eyes were seared into his memory. In his closet, a space the size of an average Seattle apartment, Ethan adjusted his Italian silk tie, his eyes scanning the rows of perfectly tailored suits and the dozens of immaculate shoes. For the first time in years, all of it, all this opulence, felt grotesque. He couldn't stop thinking about the flimsy jacket the two little girls had been forced to share. During the day's relentless meetings, Ethan found himself staring out his office window, searching the throngs below for three familiar figures. His moleskin notebook, usually filled with crisp, organized notes, was now littered with absent-minded sketches of wheelchairs and small, smiling faces in the margins. Mr. Hayes, Brenda, his assistant, brought him back to the present. The quarterly report needs your approval by the end of the day. Ethan nodded distractedly, his gaze still fixed on the street far below. An idea, an obsession, was taking root in his mind, growing more insistent with every passing hour. He had the resources, the connections, the power. Why not use them to learn more about that family? "Brenda," he called through the intercom, "I need you to do some research for me. Find the best private investigation agencies in the city, the most discreet ones." The assistant betrayed no surprise. Years of working for Ethan had conditioned her to his sometimes unorthodox requests. Within minutes, a curated list appeared in his email. Ethan spent the remainder of the afternoon dissecting his options, each agency scrutinized, its history verified, its references cross-checked. The same meticulous dedication he applied to his business acquisitions was now focused on this deeply personal mission. By day's end, 3 names remained. Ethan picked up the phone and made the call. Frank Miller, Private Investigations, a gruff professional voice answered. "Good afternoon. This is Ethan Hayes. I have a delicate matter to discuss." The conversation was brief, direct, and to the point. Ethan outlined the situation in broad strokes, careful to conceal his personal motivations. A woman in a wheelchair with twin daughters, an approximate location, the times they were usually seen, just the basic facts to initiate a search. In his penthouse that night, Ethan stared at the glittering city with a whiskey glass in his hand. The amber liquid sat untouched as his mind raced. Why was he doing this? What did he hope to find? And more importantly, what would he do with the information once he had it? His phone buzzed, a text from Frank Miller. Investigation launched. First update in 48 hours. Ethan set the phone down and walked to the window. Below, Seattle throbbed with its nocturnal energy, millions of stories unfolding simultaneously. Somewhere in that urban sprawl, a mother in a wheelchair and her twin daughters were living a story that, for some inexplicable reason, had become tangled with his own. At his desk, he opened a new encrypted file on his laptop. Personal investigation, he typed in the header. For a moment, his fingers hovered, hesitant. His business instinct screamed at him to maintain emotional distance, but something about that family had breached a wall he hadn't even known was there. The next day, Ethan arrived at his office earlier than usual. His eyes scanned the sidewalk where he had first seen them, but the spot was empty. He entered the building with a confusing mix of disappointment and relief. In 48 hours, he would start getting answers to the questions that plagued him. During the board meeting, while discussing market strategies and growth projections, Ethan discreetly scribbled in his notebook. Alongside charts and figures, he wrote down questions. Why that specific location? How long have they been in this situation? Where do they live? Any comments on the third quarter projections, Mr. Hayes? One of the directors asked. Ethan straightened in his chair, forcing himself to be present. Please continue the presentation, he replied, closing his notebook. But his mind was elsewhere, counting the hours until he received the first update from his investigator. That night, in his penthouse, Ethan created a folder on his computer titled Personal Project. Inside, he began to organize his own observations from their brief encounter. The mother's dignified posture, the girl's smiles, the handwritten sign, small details his mind had unconsciously cataloged. Lying in his king-size bed, Ethan Hayes, Seattle's ruthless tech billionaire, felt a strange and unsettling vulnerability. For the first time in years, he was wading into something he couldn't control, driven by an impulse that defied his cold, calculated logic. The watch on his bedside table showed 11:47 p.m. when he finally drifted off, his dreams filled with the images of smiling twins and green eyes that seemed to see straight through his facade of success. Ethan stared at the thick report on his mahogany desk as the last of the gray evening light filtered through the windows of his corporate penthouse. Frank Miller had just delivered the first file on Grace Miller and her daughters, Harper and Hazel. The pages contained a story far more tragic than he could have anticipated. As you can see, Mr. Hayes, the story is quite interesting, Frank remarked, pointing to a photograph. In it, a younger Grace with long, flowing hair and a luminous smile stood in front of the Fremont Dance Collective, a well-known studio in the city. Was she a teacher there? Ethan asked, his fingers unconsciously tracing the edge of the photo. One of the most talented contemporary dance instructors in the region. Her students adored her. She organized charity performances and participated in state competitions. Some of her students went on to join professional companies. Ethan flipped through the pages, his eyes landing on old newspaper clippings. One headline read, "Charity Performance Brings Together Young Dance Talents." In the photo, Grace stood surrounded by her students, her face glowing with a passion Ethan recognized. It was the same fire he saw in entrepreneurs who were truly changing the world. The accident happened 2 years ago, Frank mentioned. Before moving on, Ethan kept his focus on the more recent photos, discreetly taken by the investigators. In them, the twins played near their mother's wheelchair. Harper, identifiable by a bright pink bow, was animatedly talking to a food truck vendor. Next to her, Hazel clutched her mother's coat, watching the world with curious, attentive eyes. "The girls are quite different from each other," Frank observed, noticing Ethan's focus. "Harper is outgoing, makes friends with everyone on the street. She's always telling stories, asking questions. Hazel is more reserved, but very observant. She looks after her sister in her own quiet way." Ethan nodded, the brief moment he had seen them now making more sense. He could understand Harper's open smile and Hazel's shy grin. "We managed to find some videos from the dance studio," Frank added, placing a thumb drive on the desk. "I thought you might be interested." Later, alone in his office, Ethan plugged the drive into his computer. On the screen, a different Grace came to life. She moved with a hypnotic grace, her body a fluid instrument of the music. In another clip, she was guiding a group of teenagers, her voice full of enthusiasm as she broke down a complex sequence. The report detailed Grace's dedication to her students. She offered extra lessons for those who couldn't afford them, organized fundraisers, and always found time for one-on-one coaching. After the accident, Frank explained, her medical bills wiped out her savings. Insurance barely covered the essentials. She tried giving some private theory lessons at home during recovery, but her physical condition— Ethan made notes in his leather-bound journal, numbers, dates, facts. It was easier to process it all as objective data, like any other business analysis, but something about this story resisted the cold logic of a spreadsheet. The report also detailed the family's current routine. Grace woke the girls at 6:30 a.m. every day. Harper always insisted on picking her own mismatched clothes, while Hazel quietly wore whatever her mother chose. By 7:15, they began their journey to the local public school, a trek that took 40 minutes due to sidewalks poorly adapted for wheelchairs. Harper talks to everyone along the way, the report stated. She greets shopkeepers, asks passers-by questions, comments on the weather. Hazel stays close to the wheelchair, always keeping an eye out for obstacles in her mother's path. Ethan found himself smiling as he read about how Harper had convinced a fruit vendor to give her sister an extra apple just by complimenting his colorful display. Hazel, on the other hand, had noticed when her mother's wheelchair was making a strange noise and flagged down a bicycle mechanic who fixed the loose bolt for free. The sun had long set by the time Ethan finished reviewing all the material. His whiskey, poured hours earlier, sat untouched on the table. The final pages contained financial data, overdue bills, mounting medical debt, rent payments always on the brink. "Anything else I should look into, Mr. Hayes?" Frank had asked before leaving. Ethan had hesitated. There was so much more he wanted to know, but something held him back. Maintaining a professional distance, he replied, "Keep monitoring. I want weekly updates." Now, alone with his thoughts, Ethan moved to his office window. Below, the city was a constellation of lights. Somewhere in that vast urban landscape, Grace Miller was likely helping her daughters with homework, or maybe telling them a bedtime story. The video of Grace's old performance was still playing silently on his computer, her graceful movements a stark, painful contrast to the image of her confined to a wheelchair. Yet something in her eyes remained the same, a resilience that even tragedy couldn't extinguish. Ethan closed the video file and began methodically organizing the materials into a folder. Numbers, facts, stories, all categorized with the same efficiency he used in his business dealings. But for the first time, he felt that the data told a story that was more than just success or failure. Before putting the last photo away, his gaze lingered on the twins, Harper with her wide-open smile, and Hazel with her keen, watchful gaze. Two different sides of the same coin, united by love for their mother and a strength he was beginning to admire, even if he couldn't yet admit it to himself. The manila envelope on the table felt heavier than it should. Frank Miller had just left Ethan's office, leaving behind the final investigation report. "There's something you need to see," were his last words, spoken with an uncharacteristic gravity. Ethan poured a glass of water, ignoring the whiskey he might normally reach for. His hand trembled slightly as he broke the seal. The first page was basic information about the accident: date, time, location. Nothing he didn't already know. It was on the second page that his world began to implode. Seattle Police Department report, Marbre 2031, 1879. Vehicle involved, a dark Range Rover. License plate, EGH1. Registered owner, Ethan G. Hayes. Note, driver left the scene without rendering aid. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the polished floor. Ethan felt the air punched from his lungs as fragments of long-suppressed memories began to surface. The night of the accident, a celebratory dinner with investors, countless glasses of whiskey, his wounded pride when someone suggested he was in no state to drive. "No," he murmured, dragging his hands down his face. "It can't be." But it was. The following pages laid out every detail his mind had fought so hard to bury. He had insisted on driving, brushing off his colleagues' protests. The world had been tilting slightly, but his ego refused to summon a driver. Ethan shot up from his chair, staggering to the window. His reflection in the glass was a man he no longer recognized. That fateful night, in his drunken haze, he had lost control of the SUV. The impact, the sickening sound of twisting metal, and then he had fled. He had simply restarted the engine and driven away, leaving behind a shattered family. The images now returned in searing, painful flashes. He'd seen the emergency lights approaching in his rearview mirror, but never stopped. His lawyer had handled everything the next morning, scrubbing his name from public records, an administrative matter, the man had called it. Ethan had never asked for details. He had never wanted to know who he had hurt. "Oh, my God," he whispered, pressing his forehead against the cold glass. "What have I done?" His knees gave out, and Ethan slid to the floor, his back against the wall. Tears he hadn't shed in decades began to flow, hot and unrestrained. In his mind, he saw Grace dancing in the videos, her body moving with a fluid grace he had stolen from her forever. And the girls, Harper and Hazel, while he slept in his luxurious bed that night, they were in a hospital, waiting for news about their mother. How many nights had they cried? How many childhood dreams had been crushed by his cowardice? The pain in his chest was physical, a crushing weight of guilt that threatened to suffocate him. Ethan remained on the floor of his office for hours. The sun set and the automatic lights flickered on, illuminating him in his broken state. His phone rang incessantly, but he didn't move to answer. The world outside felt distant, unreal. When he finally managed to stand, his legs were numb. He staggered to his desk, where the report lay open. The last pages showed recent photos of Grace with the girls, their courageous smiles, her unshakable dignity in the face of the hardship he had caused, and then, cowardly, ignored. "How?" he asked the empty room. "How does she manage to smile after everything I've done?" His gaze roamed the office, landing on the awards and accolades decorating the walls. Tech Entrepreneur of the Year, 40 under 40. Hollow titles that now seemed to mock him. All his success, all his wealth, built on a foundation of silence and cowardice. Ethan switched on his laptop. With trembling fingers, he opened a new document and began to type, furiously. Ideas, plans, numbers. A support center, no, multiple centers, places that would offer medical care, rehabilitation, psychological support, spaces where people like Grace could find a real lifeline, not just superficial charity. Hours passed as he worked obsessively on the project. By sunrise, Ethan had a comprehensive plan drafted. He would use his fortune, his connections, his influence. He would create something that could truly make a difference. But it still wasn't enough. Nothing would ever be enough to erase his cowardice that night. He walked to the bathroom in his office and stared at his reflection. The man looking back was a wreck with red-rimmed eyes and tear-streaked cheeks. He was no longer the ruthless tech billionaire, the Seattle prodigy. He was just a coward, finally facing the consequences of his actions. "How will I look them in the eye?" he asked his reflection. Grace, Harper, Hazel. They had names now, faces, stories. They were no longer just anonymous victims of his irresponsibility. He returned to his desk and picked up the last photo from the report. Harper was smiling broadly at the camera while Hazel hugged their mother. It was an image of love, strength, and resilience, everything he had failed to be on that fateful night. Ethan opened a drawer and took out a bottle of whiskey he kept for special occasions. For a moment, his fingers gripped the neck of the bottle. Then, with deliberate finality, he walked to the trash can and dropped it in. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the silent office like a promise. "Brenda," he called his assistant through the intercom, "cancel all my appointments for this week and get in touch with our legal team. We have a new project to develop." He looked out the window again at the city waking below. Somewhere down there, Grace was probably getting her daughters ready for school, facing another day of challenges he had inflicted upon her with his cowardice. "I can't change the past," he murmured to himself, "but maybe I can do something about the future." And for the first time since opening that envelope, Ethan Hayes felt something beyond crushing guilt. It was a small, fragile feeling, but it was there. The determination to face what he had done, no matter how painful the process might be. In just 3 months, the old commercial building in Seattle's Sodo district had been completely transformed. The Phoenix Center now occupied all 5 floors of the fully renovated structure, its modern and welcoming facade a beacon of hope in the urban landscape. Ethan Hayes had poured every waking moment into its creation, personally overseeing every last detail of the project. The ground floor housed the main reception and a large medical wing with offices equipped for various specialties. Wide ramps and spacious elevators ensured full wheelchair accessibility. The walls, painted in soft blues and greens, displayed murals by local artists, turning each corridor into a living gallery. Mr. Hayes, the last pieces of equipment for the physical therapy room just arrived, Brenda informed him, now serving as the center's administrative coordinator. Ethan nodded, observing technicians installing state-of-the-art equipment. On the second floor, the daycare was already in full swing. The sound of children's laughter echoed through the halls as trained educators led engaging educational activities. The space was designed to accommodate kids of all ages and needs, so parents could participate in the center's programs without worry. The third floor was dedicated to professional development, with modern classrooms and computer labs offering free courses in a range of fields. "We want to give people the tools to rebuild their lives," Ethan explained during a team meeting. "It's not about charity, it's about opportunity." On the 4th floor, a multidisciplinary team of psychologists and social workers provided emotional support and guidance. Individual therapy rooms and group support spaces were carefully designed for comfort and privacy. The 5th and final floor featured a large, multi-purpose space with a library, music room, and lounge area. Its panoramic windows offered a constant reminder of the broader community they were there to serve. "We need to reach more people," Ethan insisted at the weekly meetings. His outreach team developed a broad campaign, flyers, ads in local papers, partnerships with other social assistance organizations. On a particularly busy morning, Grace Miller held one of those flyers in her trembling hands. Harper had plucked the colorful paper from a kiosk on the street, drawn by the picture of children playing. "Look, Mom," Harper exclaimed, pointing to the photos. "They have a playground just like our schools." Grace examined the material. The Phoenix Center offered exactly what she and her daughters desperately needed: specialized medical care, physical therapy, child care, and job training courses. It seemed too good to be true. "And it's all free," she murmured, rereading the flyer for the 3rd time. Hazel, always attuned to her mother's moods, quietly approached. "Can we go see it, Mom?" she asked in her soft voice. Grace folded the flyer and tucked it in her bag. Years of struggle had taught her to be wary of miracles, but the medical bills were a constant, crushing weight, and her daughters needed more than she could provide on her own. Over the next week, Grace researched the center. She spoke with social workers, She looked up information online. The name Ethan Hayes appeared in every article about the project, but she didn't connect him with the well-dressed man who had given her money months before. The Phoenix Center offers hope for struggling families, read a headline in the Seattle Times. The photos showed modern facilities, professional staff, and genuine smiles. Still, Grace hesitated. What if they don't accept us? She asked her reflection one night after putting the girls to bed. What if it's just another disappointment? But their needs were urgent. The rent was overdue again, and her wheelchair needed repairs. Harper had developed a persistent cough, and Hazel was becoming increasingly withdrawn at school. On a Thursday morning, after dropping the girls off, Grace finally worked up the courage. She navigated her wheelchair to the address on the flyer, her heart pounding with each block. The facade was impressive, yet welcoming. Smooth ramps and automatic doors invited her in. In the lobby, a receptionist greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Grace took a deep breath, clutching the crumpled flyer. "I came to get information about your services." "Of course. Let me introduce you to our social worker. She can explain all the programs we offer." While she waited, Grace observed the center's activity. Mothers with children heading to the daycare, older adults being escorted to medical appointments, young people carrying laptops. The environment was clean and organized, but it lacked the institutional coldness she had come to expect. Lisa Edwards, the social worker, was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a calming presence. She led Grace to a comfortable, adapted room. "Tell me about yourself and your needs," Lisa invited gently, without rush or judgment. The words came haltingly at first, then flowed more easily. Grace spoke of her transportation struggles, her medical needs, her desire to work again. She talked about the twins, describing their unique personalities, their dreams, and their challenges. "We have programs that can help in all these areas," Lisa explained, introducing each service. "And we can start with a full medical evaluation if you'd like. Our physical therapy team is excellent." Grace felt tears welling in her eyes. This seems too perfect. "I understand your hesitation," Lisa said with a gentle smile. "How about starting slowly? You can bring the girls on Saturday, take a look around, see how you feel." On the way back to pick up her daughters, Grace felt a mix of hope and apprehension. The center offered everything she needed, but years of letdowns had taught her caution. "How was your day, Mom?" Harper asked as soon as she saw her. "It was interesting, honey," Grace replied, watching both girls approach. "What would you think about visiting a new place on Saturday? That place from the flyer?" Harper's eyes lit up. Hazel simply squeezed her mother's hand in a small, silent show of support. "Yes, the Phoenix Center," Grace confirmed, surprised at her own decision. "We'll give it a chance." That night, after tucking the girls in, Grace reread the flyer one more time. The words hope and a fresh start stood out. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new for her family. Meanwhile, in his office on the top floor of the center, Ethan Hayes gazed at the city through the windows. He didn't know Grace had visited that day, or that she planned to return, but each person who walked through the Phoenix Center's doors carried a piece of his guilt, and every smile he helped create was one small step toward the redemption he desperately sought. "The numbers from the first week exceeded our expectations," Brenda reported, handing him a summary. Ethan only nodded, his mind elsewhere. To him, the center was just the beginning. He had plans to expand, to open more locations, to reach more people, not for recognition or prestige, but out of a deep, driving need to turn his guilt into something meaningful. As the sun set over Seattle, two people admired the same view from different parts of the city. A mother dreaming of possibilities for her daughters, and a man weighed down by a secret he would soon have to face. Saturday dawned with a different kind of light for Grace Miller. She'd awakened before her alarm, a knot of nerves in her stomach as she got the girls ready for their first visit to the Phoenix Center. Harper chattered nonstop about the playground she'd seen on the flyer, while Hazel methodically packed her small backpack with colored pencils and paper. "We'll get there early," Grace decided, double-checking that she had all the necessary documents. The ride to the center felt longer that morning, each city block charged with anticipation. At the same time, Ethan Hayes was already in his discreet office on the center's top floor. He had traded his usual suit for more casual attire, jeans, a simple dress shirt, no tie. To visitors of the center, he was just another administrative employee. "Mr. Hayes," Brenda entered quietly. "The Miller family is expected around 9 a.m. Ethan's heart quickened. He had memorized every detail in Grace's file, but the thought of seeing her in person, knowing what he knew, made his hands tremble slightly. At 8:45, Grace and the twins entered through the center's automatic doors. The lobby was calm at that hour, with only a few staff members starting their shifts. Harper immediately pointed at the colorful mural on the wall, while Hazel stayed close to her mother's wheelchair, observing everything with sharp eyes. "Good morning." Lisa, the social worker, approached them with a warm smile. "I'm so glad you came. Shall we start the tour?" From his strategic vantage point on the mezzanine, Ethan watched the scene unfold. Grace looked more tense than he remembered, her hands gently gripping the wheelchair's arms. The twins, on the other hand, radiated curiosity. The tour started on the ground floor. Lisa showed them the medical offices, explaining the different services available. "We have physical therapists specializing in rehabilitation," she said, noting Grace's interest. "We can schedule an evaluation today if you like." Harper let go of her mother's hand to examine a human anatomy model in one of the rooms, asking questions that made the staff smile. Hazel, meanwhile, carefully took notes in her little notebook. On the second floor, the daycare center prompted different reactions from the twins. Harper ran straight to the play area, while Hazel watched the reading corner with interest. "Children can stay here while parents participate in center activities," Lisa explained. "We have qualified educators and a structured learning program." Ethan, who had discreetly come downstairs to get a closer look, felt a lump in his throat, seeing Harper laughing with other kids. Her enthusiasm painfully reminded him of the innocence he had almost destroyed that tragic night. The visit continued on the third floor, where professional training courses were offered. Grace showed particular interest in the computer lab. "I've always wanted to learn more about technology," she admitted shyly. "We have basic and advanced courses," Lisa replied. "We provide all the necessary materials." On the fourth floor, dedicated to psychological support, Hazel surprised everyone by asking a question. "Do people come here when they're sad?" Lisa knelt down to meet the little girl's eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, and also when they need to talk or understand their feelings better." Ethan, following at a distance, felt his eyes burn. Hazel's sensitivity was astounding for such a small child. The fifth floor, with its library and lounge areas, was what Grace seemed to appreciate the most. Through the windows, one could see the entire city. "It's like being closer to the sky," Harper whispered, pressing her nose against the glass. "If we can start with physical therapy sessions twice a week," Lisa suggested when they returned to the reception desk. "The girls can stay in the daycare while you're at your appointments." Grace hesitated for a moment, her hands restless on the wheelchair's wheels. "And how much does all of this cost?" "Absolutely nothing," Lisa smiled kindly. "The Phoenix Center exists to help people like you, Grace." Watching from afar, Ethan saw Grace's shoulders relax slightly. A single tear slipped down her face before she discreetly wiped it away. The following Monday, Grace started her first physical therapy session. The twins were greeted at the daycare with open arms. Harper immediately became the center of attention with her stories, while Hazel found peace in the small children's library. In the weeks that followed, Ethan maintained a silent watch. He observed from afar Grace's progress in therapy, the way her face lit up when she managed a new movement. He saw Harper making friends with her outgoing personality, and Hazel slowly blossoming in her own quiet way. Every time the girls laughed, Ethan felt a dagger in his heart. Every smile from Grace was a reminder of what he had taken from her. But there was also something else, a faint hope that, in some way, the center was making a difference. "The Miller twins are remarkable," commented one of the educators in a meeting. "Harper has a natural musical talent, and Hazel, well, she's already reading above her grade level." Ethan merely nodded, storing every bit of information like a precious and painful treasure. In his office, he kept a folder with the family's progress reports, documenting each small achievement meticulously. A month after starting therapy, Grace was already showing significant improvement. She sat up straighter, moved more confidently. The twins were thriving as well. Harper had joined the children's choir, while Hazel joined a small writers' club. On a particularly sunny afternoon, Ethan was in his office, watching as Grace and the girls enjoyed a picnic in the center's garden. Harper spun around her mother, telling an animated story, while Hazel quietly drew in her notebook. Their laughter drifted up to him through the open window. The scene was so domestic, so full of life, that Ethan felt his chest tighten. There they were, three people whose lives he had irreversibly changed, finding joy despite everything, because of everything. "Mr. Hayes," Brenda interrupted his thoughts, "the monthly reports are ready for your review." Ethan nodded reluctantly, stepping away from the window. The numbers on the report showed the Phoenix Center's success. Hundreds of people served, dozens of uplifting stories. But for him, the entire project boiled down to 3 smiles in the garden. That evening, before leaving the center, Ethan passed through the empty daycare. On the wall, among other drawings, he found one by Harper, a bright rainbow over what looked like the Phoenix Center. Next to it was a carefully written text by Hazel, "A place where Mom smiles more." Ethan touched the drawing lightly, feeling the weight of his actions and the responsibility of his redemption. The Phoenix Center was doing exactly what he dreamed, bringing light to lives he'd helped darken. But the truth still loomed over him like a shadow, a secret that would eventually have to be revealed. For now, he contented himself with being a silent presence, an invisible guardian watching from afar as Grace and her daughters built a new life, one day at a time. A rainy Tuesday brought the moment Ethan both feared and secretly longed for. Grace had an appointment with a rehabilitation specialist, and the daycare was unexpectedly closed for maintenance. Harper and Hazel waited in the medical office's reception area, sharing a storybook. Ethan was casually passing by in the hallway when he saw them. His heart sped up, and for a moment he considered walking on, but something in the way Hazel furrowed her brow at the hard words while Harper gestured animatedly, explaining the story, made him stop. "Do you like books?" he asked softly, approaching with care not to startle them. Harper looked up immediately, her face breaking into her characteristic smile. Hazel, more reserved, instinctively held the book closer to her chest. "It's about a girl who finds a magical door," Harper answered excitedly. "Hazel's helping me with the big words." Ethan pulled up a chair, maintaining a respectful distance. "Can I know which words those are?" "Muse," Hazel pronounced quietly, surprising everyone by speaking first. "And extraordinary." "Very important words for a magical story," Ethan remarked, fighting a lump in his throat. Seeing the girls up close, hearing their voices, was different from watching from a distance. "Do you work here?" Harper asked, tilting her head curiously. "Yes," Ethan answered nervously, adjusting his glasses. "I help make sure everything runs smoothly at the center." "So you're the one who put the pictures on the walls?" Harper continued. "I love the one of the dragon reading books in the library." Ethan smiled, recalling the art he had personally chosen. "I thought the children would like it." "Hazel draws better," Harper declared with sisterly pride. "Show him, Haz." Hazel hesitated, but eventually took out her sketchbook from her small backpack. Ethan admired the delicate lines. Scenes of the center, portraits of her sister, and many, many drawings of her mother. "They're beautiful," he said sincerely. "How you capture the details really well." Mom says Hazel sees things other people don't notice, Harper explained, putting her arm around her sister's shoulders. And you, Harper, what do you like to do most? Ethan asked, noticing how the girl practically vibrated with pent-up energy. Telling stories and singing? I joined the choir. Did you know we're having a Christmas concert? Her enthusiasm was infectious. I wish Mom could dance again so she could watch. Ethan's smile faltered for a moment. Hazel, ever perceptive, noticed the change in his expression. Are you sad? She asked in her gentle voice. Sometimes grown-ups get sad thinking about grown-up things, Ethan replied, trying to keep his voice steady. But tell me more about the Christmas concert. Harper launched into a detailed description of rehearsals, the songs chosen, the costumes planned. Hazel occasionally added details her sister forgot, the two working in perfect tandem. Mom cries sometimes, Hazel said suddenly, during a pause in Harper's narrative, when she thinks we're not looking. Ethan felt as though all the air had been sucked from his lungs. What do you do when that happens? I tell funny stories, Harper answered immediately. And I draw pictures, Hazel added, until she smiles again. Ethan struggled against the tears threatening to form. The girls' resilience, their devotion to their mother, was both inspiring and devastating. You're both very special, he said, his voice slightly hoarse. Our teacher said we're like two parts of the same star, Harper said proudly. Different, but we shine together. And your mom? Does she like the center? Hazel nodded solemnly. She smiles more here. And the exercises are helping, Harper added excitedly. Yesterday, she managed to move her toes just a little, but she was so happy. Ethan absorbed every word, every expression. It was so different from reading about their progress in medical reports. He could see the genuine joy on the girls' faces as they described their mother's small victories. Sometimes I'm scared, Hazel confessed quietly, surprising both Ethan and Harper. What are you scared of, sweetheart? Ethan asked gently. That one day we won't be able to come here anymore, that it'll be like it was before. Harper immediately hugged her sister. But now it's different. The center is magical, isn't it, mister? John, Ethan improvised quickly. Now you can call me John, and you don't have to be afraid. This center will always be here for you. It was a promise he intended to keep at any cost. Mr. John, Harper said, her face suddenly serious. Can you make more centers like this for other people like Mom? The question hit Ethan like a punch in the stomach. That's exactly what we're planning to do, he responded truthfully. The sound of wheels approaching made all three turn their heads. Grace was returning from her appointment. I have to go now, Ethan said, standing up quickly. It was nice getting to know you better. Will you come back to talk more? Harper asked hopefully. And see my other drawings? Hazel added shyly. Ethan nodded, unable to trust his own voice at that moment. He quickly slipped away, turning a corner just as Grace reached the girls. In his office a few minutes later, Ethan finally allowed the tears to fall. The twins' innocence, their capacity to love and care in the face of hardship, had struck a deep chord in his soul. He picked up his phone and dialed a familiar number. Brenda, I need you to fast-track our plans for the new center locations, and I want the family support budget doubled. Looking out the window, he saw Grace and the girls leaving. Harper was probably chatting away about her new friend, Mr. John, while Hazel held a small umbrella over her mother. Ethan knew that conversation had changed something fundamental inside him. It was no longer just about guilt or redemption. It was about ensuring those girls, and many other children like them, would never again have to fear what tomorrow might bring. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. The twins' voices echoed in his mind, each word a needle in his conscience. The way Harper spoke of her mom dancing again, Hazel's quiet admission of nightly fears, all of it swirled in a vortex of guilt that threatened to consume him. In his penthouse, he paced back and forth, replaying every moment of their encounter. Harper's confident smile, Hazel's detailed sketches. How could he pretend to be just John, an ordinary staff member at the center, when his actions had forever changed these children's lives? Grace also struggled to sleep that night. Something about the man talking to her daughters unsettled her. There was a familiarity in his face, a disturbing feeling that she should recognize him. "He was really nice, Mom," Harper had said excitedly on the way home. "He said he's going to build more centers to help people." "And he liked my drawings," Hazel added softly, a small smile brightening her usually serious expression. Grace couldn't explain her discomfort. The man seemed genuinely interested in her daughters, and the twins clearly felt comfortable with him, but there was something in his eyes, a deep sadness, a barely disguised guilt, that disturbed her. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the center even earlier. His deep-set eyes and trembling hands didn't go unnoticed by Brenda. "Mr. Hayes, are you all right?" she asked, clearly worried. "Just a rough night," he answered automatically, though he knew it was much more than that. The mask he'd worn for so long was starting to crack. During the morning team meeting, Ethan could barely concentrate. Every mention of rehabilitation programs brought Grace to mind. Any discussion about children's activities triggered images of the twins. "We need to expand the psychological support program," he said abruptly, interrupting a budget discussion, "and I want daily reports on the Miller family's progress." His obsession was becoming obvious. The staff exchanged concerned glances, but no one dared challenge him. In the hallway later, Ethan almost collided with Grace. She was leaving her physical therapy session, and he was too distracted to notice her approach. "I'm sorry," he muttered, helping stabilize her wheelchair. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Ethan felt his heart stop. "You're John, right?" Grace asked, a slight frown indicating she was trying to place him in her memory. "My daughters talked a lot about you." Ethan could only nod, his throat suddenly dry. Up close, he saw the faint lines of worry around her eyes, the marks his irresponsibility had left behind. "They are special kids," he managed to say, his voice husky. "They really are," Grace smiled, the same smile he'd seen in the videos from before the accident. "They've helped me so much since—" She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't have to. Ethan felt the weight of that silence like an accusation. "I have to go," he blurted out, practically running to his office. Locked in his room, Ethan felt like he was suffocating. He picked up his phone, his fingers hovering over his lawyer's number. It would be so easy to keep hiding the truth, to maintain the facade of an anonymous benefactor. "Mr. Hayes," Brenda's voice through the intercom startled him. "The kids in the choir are rehearsing in the multi-purpose hall. Harper Miller asked if Mr. John could come watch." "Tell her I'm busy," he replied harshly, hating himself for letting the child down. The hours dragged. Ethan canceled all his appointments, claiming he felt unwell. In reality, he no longer trusted himself to remain composed. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Harper's hopeful face, Hazel's observant stare. That night, alone in his penthouse, Ethan poured himself a glass of water. He had banned all alcohol from his home since learning the truth. A commercial about safe driving came on the TV, and he quickly changed the channel. His phone buzzed with a message from Brenda. Harper left a drawing for Mr. John. The attached photo showed a colorful illustration, 3 figures holding hands with what appeared to be a guardian angel hovering above them. Ethan dropped the phone, his hands trembling uncontrollably. What kind of guardian angel was he, having destroyed that family's life only to hide behind a false identity? The sound of rain against the windows transported him momentarily back to that fateful night. The crash, the headlights spinning in the darkness, his cowardly escape. "I have to tell them," he murmured for what felt like the 100th time. They deserved to know the truth. But each time he imagined doing so, he pictured Harper's smile vanishing, Hazel's accusatory gaze, and Grace's disappointment and anger. How could he destroy the trust they had placed in Mr. John? In the following days, Ethan became a ghost in the center. He avoided common areas, communicating solely through memos and emails. Whenever he heard the twins' voices in the halls, he hid in empty rooms until they passed. Brenda noticed the shift in his behavior. The determined, focused man who had built the Phoenix Center seemed to be unraveling from the inside. "Maybe you should take a few days off," she gently suggested. Ethan just shook his head. Leaving meant cutting off his only contact, however indirect, with the family he had wronged. It was both his punishment and his lifeline. One afternoon, he found another of Hazel's drawings on his desk, this time depicting Mr. John sitting with the twins, books spread around them. The precision of the detail was striking, his tense posture, the way he nervously adjusted his glasses, even the sadness in his eyes. That child saw too much, understood too much. One day, Ethan feared, she would connect the dots. Then his world of lies would come crashing down. The weight of the secret was literally eating him alive. He had lost weight, his clothes now too loose. Dark circles carved themselves under his eyes, and his hands trembled constantly. "How long?" he asked his reflection one night, staring at the bathroom mirror. "How long until the truth comes out?" The answer, he knew, was only a matter of time. Secrets have a way of revealing themselves, especially those we carry like chains around our souls. Grace watched John through the window of the physical therapy room. He was in the garden, listening attentively as Harper chattered away, while Hazel sat silently beside him, drawing. There was something in the way he looked at her daughters, a mix of affection and guilt. "Has he always been like this?" she asked Lisa, who was adjusting the therapy equipment. "Like what?" the social worker responded absently. "So invested in the children's progress, so focused on my family in particular." Lisa hesitated for a moment before answering, "Mr. Joe, he cares about everyone here." Grace noticed the hesitation, the near slip of the name. It was yet another piece of the puzzle she was assembling in her mind. In the garden, Ethan struggled to keep his composure as Harper described the performance she was preparing for the center's talent festival. "You'll be there, right, Mr. John?" Harper asked, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. I'll try," he answered, knowing he should keep his distance, but unable to disappoint her. Hazel raised her eyes from her sketchbook, studying his face with that intensity that always disarmed him. "You seem sad again." "Sometimes grown-ups feel sad about things they've done wrong," he said, before he could stop himself. "Like when I broke Mom's vase and didn't tell her?" Harper asked innocently. Ethan felt his heart tighten. "Something like that, but much bigger." "Mom always says we should tell the truth," Hazel commented quietly, returning her attention to her drawing. "Even when it's hard." Ethan got up abruptly. I need to get back to work." Later that same day, Grace was in the center's library researching job opportunities when she came across an old magazine. On the cover, a photo caught her eye. A man in an elegant suit, accepting an Entrepreneur of the Year award. There was something familiar about him. "Grace?" John's voice startled her. She quickly closed the magazine. "Sorry, I wanted to talk about the girls' progress," he continued nervously. "Harper is doing really well in the choir, and Hazel, her drawings are incredible." Grace studied him intently. The way he spoke about her daughters felt almost parental, and there was something else, a sense of urgency in his voice, as though he wanted to say more, much more. "Why do you care so much?" she asked bluntly. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. I care about all the children here, but you have a special interest in my daughters." "Why?" The moment was there, the chance to confess everything. Ethan opened his mouth, the words ready to pour out. "Mom?" Harper burst into the library, unknowingly rescuing him. "Look what I did in choir practice." The moment passed, the confession swallowed once again. That night, in her apartment, Grace searched the internet for more about the Phoenix Center. Most of the information was vague, mentioning only an anonymous benefactor. But in an older article, she found a photo from the grand opening. In the background, partially visible, was him, John, but wearing an expensive suit rather than the casual clothes he wore at the center. The next day, she watched him more closely. The way he moved around the center was not that of a mere employee. People treated him with a subtle deference, almost unconsciously. "Mr. John," Harper called him at lunchtime, "can you sit with us?" Grace saw the conflict in his eyes, the desire to accept battling with something that looked like fear. Just for a moment, he relented, taking a seat at their table. During lunch, Grace noticed how he knew her daughter's preferences. He knew Harper disliked carrots, that Hazel wanted her sandwich cut into triangles. "How do you know so much about my daughters?" she asked when the girls went to return their trays. I observe." "It's my job to observe everyone in the center," he replied, but his voice trembled slightly. Grace leaned forward. "Who are you, really?" Panic crossed his face for an instant before he regained composure. "Just someone who wants to help." Later, Grace found Hazel showing him her newest drawing, a detailed portrait of him, but in the drawing he wore an elegant suit, not the simple clothes he usually wore at the A Center. "Why did you draw him like that?" Grace asked her daughter afterwards. "Because that's how he looks in the pictures from the big office," Hazel answered simply. Grace felt a chill run down her spine. What big office? What else had her observant daughter noticed? Ethan, for his part, was losing control of his carefully crafted facade. Each interaction with the twins left him more vulnerable. Each questioning look from Grace pushed him closer to the edge. "Mr. Hayes," Brenda warned one day, "people are starting to notice your erratic behavior." "I can't help it," he said, rubbing his tired face. "They need to know the truth." "But not like this," Brenda argued, "not with you destroying yourself in the process." The following Friday, during the children's choir performance, Grace noticed how he stayed in the shadows, unshed tears shining in his eyes as Harper sang. "Mr. John is our guardian angel," Harper declared that night while Grace tucked her in. "Why do you say that, honey?" "Because he takes care of us without us seeing," the child answered sleepily. "Like a real angel." Grace stayed awake for hours after that, the puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. The well-dressed man who had given her money on the street months ago, the mysterious benefactor of the center, the employee who knew her family so well. In his office, Ethan also couldn't sleep. On the wall, the twins' drawings formed a mosaic of his guilt and redemption. On his desk, that day's newspaper carried a small note about the anniversary of the accident that had changed Grace's life. Tomorrow, he decided, looking at the most recent photo of the girls. Tomorrow, I'll tell them everything. But he had made this promise to himself many times before, and the truth remained lodged in his throat, a burden too heavy to carry and impossible to reveal. The Phoenix Center was nearly empty that rainy Friday afternoon. Most staff and visitors had already left, leaving the corridors quiet and the rooms deserted. Ethan was in his office, hands trembling as he tried to sign some important documents. Brenda had insisted he go home to rest. Over the past few weeks, his condition had visibly worsened. He'd lost weight, had deep circles under his eyes, and sometimes seemed to lose focus in the middle of conversations. "Mr. Hayes," she tried again, "you really should—" "I can't leave," he interrupted brusquely. "Grace and the girls are still here. Oh, it's their last day this week." On the other side of the center, in the fifth-floor library, Grace watched her daughters. Harper was rehearsing her song for the next day's presentation, while Hazel drew quietly. A folder of clippings and articles lay open on the table. Weeks of research into the mysterious Mr. John. "Girls," she called gently, "can you wait here for a moment? Mom needs to take care of something important." Harper nodded distractedly, immersed in her singing. Hazel, however, looked up from her drawing, worry on her keen face. Grace navigated her wheelchair through the now familiar corridors, her heart pounding. After weeks of piecing clues together, confronting nervous staff, and scouring the internet, she was certain. John was not just a staff member, he was Ethan Hayes, the billionaire founder of the center. And there was something more, something she still couldn't fully grasp. In his office, Ethan stood by the window, watching the rain. The sound of wheels in the hallway made his heart freeze for a moment. "We need to talk," Grace's firm voice came from behind him. Ethan turned slowly. "Grace, No," she interrupted. "First, explain to me why billionaire Ethan Hayes is pretending to be a simple employee at his own center." Blood drained from his face. How? It wasn't hard to connect the dots. What's hard is understanding why. Why this special interest in my family? Why the guilt in your eyes every time you look at my daughters? Ethan stumbled to his chair, his legs no longer supporting him. I tried to tell you so many times." Small footsteps echoed in the corridor. Harper and Hazel, worried about their mother's delay, had decided to look for her. "What are you trying to make up for, Mr. Hayes?" Grace pressed, her voice trembling slightly. "What's the real reason behind all of this?" "Mom?" Harper's voice reached the doorway. "Mr. John?" Ethan looked up, seeing the twins standing there. Hazel held a new drawing in her hands, her eyes capturing the tension in the room. "Please," he whispered, "not in front of them." But it was too late. Years of repressed guilt, weeks of mounting tension, all exploded in that moment. "I was there," he shouted, tears finally breaking free. "I was driving that night. I was drunk. I lost control. I ran away." Silence followed, deafening and absolute. Grace felt the air leave her lungs as the memories of that night came rushing back in painful flashes. "No," she murmured, gripping the arms of her wheelchair. "It can't be." "Mom?" Harper's voice trembled. "What's happening?" Hazel dropped her drawing, a picture of Mr. John smiling with her and Harper in the center's garden. "I built all this to try to make amends," Ethan continued, his words spilling out like water from a shattered dam. "When I found out who you were, I couldn't just... I had to do something. "You ran away," Grace whispered, her voice laced with icy anger. "You left me there with my daughters." "Is Mr. John bad?" Harper asked, tears sliding down her cheeks. Hazel simply clung to her mother, her small body trembling. "I'm so sorry," Ethan sobbed, falling to his knees. I'm so sorry." "Sorry isn't enough," Grace yelled, years of pain and struggle erupting in her voice. "Do you have any idea what we went through? What my daughter went through?" Harper broke into loud sobs, confused and scared. Hazel remained silent, but her silent tears were just as devastating. The center, all of this, Grace gestured around her, was built on guilt. Not compassion, not love, but guilt. "I know," Ethan answered, his voice broken, but it became more than that. "Watching you, getting to know the girls, it became about love, too, about trying. To fix?" "Some things can't be fixed," Grace cut him off, her voice now dangerously calm. "Harper, Hazel, let's go." "But Mom, the presentation tomorrow," Harper began. "There won't be a presentation," Grace yelled, instantly regretting it when she saw her daughters shrink back. More gently, she continued, "We can't stay here anymore, sweethearts." "Please," Ethan begged, "don't take this away from them. The center is theirs too. All these people, these programs, they're real, they're sincere." "How can we trust anything built on lies?" Grace asked, tears now streaming down her face. Hazel stepped toward Ethan, her small eyes fixed on his. "Did you hurt our mom?" The child's simple, direct question felt like a knife in Ethan's heart. "Yes," he answered through sobs, "and I'll never forgive myself." Harper picked up Hazel's dropped drawing, staring at the happy image that now felt like it belonged to another world. "But you helped us too," she said softly. "Let's go, girls," Grace ordered, her voice trembling. "We need to go home." The twins cast one last look at Ethan before following their mother. On the floor, the abandoned drawing showed 3 smiling figures, mocking the scene that had just unfolded. Hours later, Brenda found Ethan in the same spot, still kneeling on the floor, clutching Hazel's drawing in his trembling hands. The truth, finally revealed, had devastated not only one family, but also the man who thought he could buy his redemption with good deeds. Outside, the storm raged on, as though nature itself were mourning the innocence lost that afternoon. Grace gripped the wheels of her chair tightly as she left the police station. She had just done something that would change many lives. She had filed a formal complaint against Ethan Hayes. The anger and pain of years of suffering had finally found her voice. The news broke the next morning. Victim files charges against Billionaire founder of the Phoenix Center. Crime from the past resurfaces. The headlines blared. The case, long buried, resurfaced with full force, fueled by Ethan's own confession and Grace's detailed testimony. Entrepreneur Ethan Hayes accused of DUI and hit and run that left mother paralyzed, the broadcasts announced. Within hours, reporters had swarmed the Phoenix Center building, cameras pointed at every entrance and exit. Grace watched the coverage on her small TV at home, the twins sleeping fitfully in the next room. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists hungry for more details, asking why she had waited so long to come forward, how she had discovered the truth. She turned the phone off after the 10th call. "Mom?" Hazel appeared in the doorway, holding her sketchbook tight against her chest. "Is there no art class today?" Grace felt her heart clench. "No, sweetheart. We've talked about this. We can't go back to the center." "But why?" Harper asked, her eyes swollen from crying. "Mr. John said he was sorry." "He's not, mister." "John," Grace snapped, immediately regretting it when she saw the girl shrink back. Softer, she continued, "His name is Ethan Hayes, and he hurt us badly." At the Phoenix Center, chaos reigned. Employees tried to shield the visitors from invasive reporters while rumors of closure circulated. Brenda managed the crisis as best she could, but without Ethan, who had isolated himself in his penthouse since the complaint, the situation looked grim. "Mr. Hayes," she said over the phone, "we need you here. People are scared and confused." "How is Grace?" he asked, the only response he could muster. "How are the girls? They haven't returned since that day. And now with the complaint." At the police station, a detective led the investigation with renewed vigor. The evidence was now clear. Ethan's confession, the hidden records, the cover-up attempts, all backed by Grace's testimony. "Mr. Hayes," the detective said gravely during Ethan's official questioning, "do you understand the seriousness of these charges? Driving under the influence, causing a serious accident, and fleeing the scene are severe crimes." Ethan only nodded, his lawyer by his side, trying to manage the fallout. But he didn't want to hide behind legal technicalities anymore. "I want to take full responsibility," he declared, ignoring his lawyer's protests. "Mrs. Miller is right to file charges." At home, Grace struggled to maintain normalcy for her girls. But how do you explain to a child that their hero was actually the person responsible for their family's tragedy? "Hazel won't stop drawing him," Harper confided one night while Grace tucked her in. But now all her pictures are sad. Later, Grace found dozens of Hazel's sketches. John took Ethan always with tears in his eyes, always alone, always in shades of gray and dark blue. One depicted the scene at the police station as Hazel imagined it, showing Grace strong and resolute in her wheelchair, confronting the man who'd wrecked their lives. The media frenzy showed no mercy. Every day brought new revelations about the accident, how it had been covered up, how much money had been spent to silence witnesses, how the Phoenix Center had arisen from one wealthy man's guilt. "But what about the people the center helps?" Harper asked during dinner, surprising Grace with her insight. "Do they have to suffer now because of what he did?" It was a question that haunted many. The Phoenix Center had become a beacon of hope for hundreds of families. Its tainted origin, did that condemn all the good it was doing? From his penthouse, Ethan watched everything collapse. Water bottles piled up beside legal reports and newspaper headlines. He hadn't touched alcohol since his confession, a final attempt to prove he had changed. "The twins keep asking about you," Brenda said during one of her visits. Harper dropped out of the choir performance. Hazel isn't drawing anything colorful anymore. Each word was a stab to his heart. Ethan picked up one of Hazel's older drawings, him reading stories to the girls in the garden. It felt like a memory from another lifetime. At school, the twins had their own battles. Some parents, upon discovering their connection to the high-profile case, kept their children away from them. Harper, usually so chatty, had become quiet. Hazel barely spoke. "I want to go back to the choir," Harper cried one night. "I want to show Mr. John I learned the whole song." "I want to show him my new drawing," Hazel whispered, clutching her sketchbook. Grace felt torn between the certainty that pressing charges was right and the pain of seeing her daughters suffer. The center had become more than a place for therapy. It was a second home, a community, a promise of a better future. One afternoon, an envelope arrived. Inside were a letter from Ethan and a legal document transferring ownership of the Phoenix Center to an independent foundation. "I understand your decision to file charges," the letter read. "It's your right, and I deserve the consequences. I can't undo what I did, but I can ensure the center continues to help people no matter what happens to me. Its doors will always be open to you, even if I can never be there again." In court days later, Ethan pleaded guilty to all charges. The judge, considering his work with the Phoenix Center and his voluntary confession, sentenced him to community service and a substantial settlement for the Miller family. "Money won't fix anything," Grace told her lawyer, "but justice needed to be served, and it can secure a better future for the girls." The media storm eventually died down, leaving lives forever changed. The Phoenix Center, now under new management, continued its work, though the twins' laughter no longer echoed in its corridors. In her sketchbook, Hazel drew one last portrait. Her mother, strong, at the police station, filing the complaint that would change their lives, with Hazel and Harper at her side, small but resilient. In the corner stood a solitary figure, Ethan, watching from afar, regret and acceptance etched into his carefully drawn face. Underneath, in her childish handwriting, she wrote, "Sometimes the truth hurts, but lies hurt more." The courtroom was packed that morning. Outside, protesters held signs with conflicting messages, some demanding harsh justice for Ethan Hayes, others defending the Phoenix Center's continued existence. Grace watched from the car window as her brother helped her with the wheelchair. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked, noticing her tension. Grace nodded, her eyes fixed on the courthouse steps. The twins were with their aunt, shielded from the media circus their case had become. Harper had begged to come, but Grace didn't want her daughters to witness this. Inside the courtroom, Ethan Hayes sat beside his lawyers, looking like he'd aged years in a few weeks. His eyes briefly met Grace's when she entered, before dropping to his clasped hands. "The state calls Grace Miller to the stand," the prosecutor announced. Grace maneuvered her chair to the witness box, feeling the weight of hundreds of gazes on her. Among the spectators, she recognized faces from the Phoenix Center, parents from the daycare, physical therapy patients, students from the job training courses. "Mrs. Miller," the prosecutor began, "can you tell us about the night of the accident?" Grace closed her eyes for a moment, the memories of that night flooding back with painful clarity. "I was driving home after a dance performance. The girls, only 2 years old then, were with the babysitter." Her voice stayed steady as she described the impact, the fear, the pain, how she had cried out for help, hearing only the sound of a car speeding away. "And how did you discover Mr. Hayes was responsible?" Grace looked directly at Ethan. "He confessed it himself after months of getting close to my family under a false identity at the Phoenix Center." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The defense lawyer stood to begin cross-examination. "Mrs. Miller, how has the Phoenix Center impacted your life and your daughters' lives?" Grace hesitated. This was the hardest part, acknowledging the good that had emerged from something so terrible. "The center changed our lives," she finally admitted. "It provided medical treatment I couldn't afford, an education for my daughters, a supportive community. And Mr. Hayes, even under a false identity, didn't he show genuine remorse and a desire to help?" "Objection!" the prosecutor shouted, leading the witness. Sustained, the judge replied, "Rephrase your question." But Grace had already answered. Yes, he showed remorse. Yes, the center helped many people. But that doesn't erase what he did. Running away, hiding, lying for years. In the courthouse waiting area, Brenda showed Harper and Hazel via video call how the Phoenix Center was still running. "The choir misses you, Harper," she said gently. "And Hazel, your art teacher, has kept your supplies just as you left them." The girls watched the screen, eyes brimming with tears. "Mom said Mr. Hayes did something really bad," Harper commented. "But he also did good things, didn't he?" Hazel, quiet as ever, showed her newest drawing. The courtroom split in half, light on one side, darkness on the other, with both worlds colliding in the middle. Back in the courtroom, experts testified about the Phoenix Center's impact on the community. Impressive statistics were presented. Hundreds of transformed lives, dozens of social programs, millions invested in free assistance. The defendant may have acted out of guilt initially, argued the defense, but he turned that guilt into something extraordinarily positive for society. The prosecutor countered, "Good deeds afterward do not absolve past crimes." Mr. Hayes evaded responsibility, leaving a family in ruins, and only acted when his guilt overwhelmed him. Ethan listened to everything in silence. When it was his turn to testify, his voice was ragged with emotion. "I'm not here asking for forgiveness," he began. "What I did that night is unforgivable. I ran away out of cowardice and fear, selfishness. The Phoenix Center was born out of guilt, yes, but it became something bigger than my own redemption." His eyes met Grace's. "I only ask that the center not be punished for my mistakes. Those people, those families, they don't deserve to lose this support because of my sin." Outside, the Phoenix Center community held a vigil. People in wheelchairs, children from the daycare with their parents, elderly participants in health programs, all united in hope for the center's future. At home, Grace found her daughter's drawing. Harper had drawn the choir, leaving an empty space where she used to stand. Hazel was sketching the courtroom, but from a unique perspective. All the adults in shades of gray, only the children in bright colors. "Mom," Hazel asked softly, "why do good people sometimes do bad things?" Grace felt tears in her eyes. How could she explain the complexity of the human heart to a child? "Sometimes," she replied carefully, "people have both good and bad inside them. What matters is what they choose to do with it." The trial lasted for days. The media speculated on the outcome, the community debated the center's future, and two little girls tried to make sense of how their world had become so complicated, so quickly. "The jury has reached a verdict," the judge finally announced. Grace held her breath. Ethan straightened in his seat. In the back of the courtroom, Brenda clutched one of Hazel's drawings, a depiction of the Phoenix Center under a sky half stormy, half sunny. The verdict balanced justice with mercy. Ethan was found guilty, but his sentence took into account both the severity of his crime and his subsequent acts of restitution. The Phoenix Center would remain open, transferred to an independent foundation, ensuring its continuity. "It's not a happy ending," Grace explained to the twins that night, "but maybe it's a new beginning." Harper hugged the choir uniform she hadn't worn in weeks. Hazel picked up her sketchbook, flipping to a blank page. "Can I draw our story?" she asked timidly. Grace nodded, watching as her daughter began drawing lines, not in black and white anymore, but in all the complex shades of reality they were learning to accept. 3 months after the trial, Ethan Hayes began his court-ordered community service at the Phoenix Center, no longer as the powerful founder or mysterious Mr. John, but as a man carrying out his sentence in an orange maintenance vest. His mornings were dedicated to cleaning, fixing, and maintaining the facility he had built. The center's new administration, led by Brenda and an independent board, introduced significant changes. Transparent signage detailed the institution's origins, turning its controversial history into a lesson on redemption and second chances. On a particularly busy morning, Grace wheeled herself into the center's entrance for the first time since the trial. Harper and Hazel walked alongside her, holding bags of materials for their activities. "Are you sure, Mom?" Harper asked, her voice a mix of anxiety and hope. Grace took a deep breath, observing the bustle around them. "Yes, dear. This place doesn't belong to just one person. It belongs to all of us." In the garden, Ethan was trimming bushes when he saw them arrive. His first impulse was to hide, but his therapist's words echoed in his mind. Running away is no longer an option. The twins noticed him first. Harper squeezed Hazel's hand, who instinctively reached for her sketchbook, her security blanket, during emotional moments. "Mr. Hayes," Grace greeted him formally, her voice controlled. "Mrs. Miller," he responded, taking off his gardening gloves. "Welcome back." The moment might have been tense, but Harper, with her unique ability to break down barriers, took a step forward. "Are you taking care of the flowers Hazel and I planted?" Ethan felt tears in his eyes. "Yes, they've grown a lot since you left." Hazel quietly opened her sketchbook, showing him a recent drawing. The Phoenix Center reborn after a storm, with small flowers blooming all over the garden. The day went by with surprising normalcy. Grace resumed her physical therapy sessions, this time with renewed goals. Harper rejoined the choir, her voice once again joining the other children's. Hazel returned to her art room, slowly adding color back into her drawings. Ethan kept a respectful distance, but his presence was felt in subtle ways. A repaired swing set, a better ramp for access, fresh flowers at the reception desk. "He's really trying," Lisa told Grace during a session, "not for publicity or image management, but in everyday details." Grace watched through the window as Ethan taught a group of volunteers how to care for the therapeutic gardens. "People can change," she said thoughtfully, "when they choose to face their actions instead of running from them." The twins were also processing the situation in their own ways. Harper wrote a song about forgiveness for the center's talent festival, its lyrics innocent yet profoundly moving. Hazel created a series of drawings showing the center's transformation from initial chaos to the present harmony. "Mom," Hazel asked one night, "why do some people have to get hurt before they learn to do good?" Grace pondered her observant daughter's question. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people only realize the impact of their actions when they face the consequences." One rainy afternoon, a small accident forced an unexpected meeting. In the garden, Harper slipped in the mud, and Ethan was the first to reach her. For a moment, everyone froze. Ethan hesitating to touch the girl, Grace tensing in her chair, Hazel watching intensely. "It's okay," Harper broke the silence, accepting Ethan's outstretched hand. "Sometimes we fall, but what matters is getting back up, right?" The simple wisdom of a child brought tears to the adult's eyes. The Phoenix Center continued to grow. New programs were introduced, always with complete transparency about its management and funding. Ethan, even after fulfilling his required community service hours, kept volunteering his time. "Why do you still come?" Hazel asked one day, finding him repairing a bench in the garden. "Because some broken things need more than money to be fixed," he answered honestly. "They need time, dedication, and consistent effort." The community began to notice the changes. The man who once hid behind power and wealth was now working side by side with other volunteers, sharing knowledge, listening to stories, making a direct and personal impact. Grace, seeing his transformation, felt her own healing progress. Her physical therapy sessions showed significant improvement, driven by renewed determination. "It's not about forgiving and forgetting," she explained to her daughters. "It's about not letting the past stop us from moving forward." On a special morning, the center hosted a garden planting ceremony. Each person present, patients, staff, volunteers, planted a seedling, symbolizing growth and hope. Harper chose a sunflower because they always look for the light, she explained. Hazel planted lavender to bring calm on difficult days. Grace selected a resilient climbing plant that would grow supported by the center's structure. Ethan, quietly working in a corner of the garden, planted roses. "They have thorns," he told Hazel when she came over to watch, "to remind us that beauty and pain sometimes grow together." The day ended with a choir performance where Harper sang her new song about forgiveness. In the front row, Grace listened with tears in her eyes while Hazel sketched the scene. A portrait of the united community, each face unique, each story individual, all part of something larger than themselves. "The center is stronger now," Brenda commented to Grace, "more authentic." Grace nodded, watching her daughters interact with other children, their laughter echoing through a place they had chosen not to abandon. In the garden, Ethan continued his quiet work, planting seeds of change, one small action at a time. Sometimes, Grace reflected, the path to redemption isn't a highway, it's a series of small steps in the right direction. Hazel captured that moment in her final drawing. The Phoenix Center, no longer split between light and darkness, but bathed in the colors of dawn, with small figures working together to build something new on the foundations of the past. The Phoenix Center bustled with activity that spring morning. Colorful banners announced the second annual Community Arts and Inclusion Festival, while volunteers rushed around making final preparations. On the main stage, 8-year-old Harper Miller led the children's choir in a final rehearsal, her natural confidence apparent in every gesture. "Sing louder" on the second verse. She directed the other kids, her enthusiasm now channeled into a natural leadership. Nearby, in the therapeutic garden, Hazel was arranging an art exhibition featuring drawings made by the center's patients. Her own works, now more mature and complex, depicted the center's transformation as seen through the eyes of a child growing up alongside it. Grace Miller crossed the main lobby in her motorized wheelchair, greeting staff and participants. As the coordinator of several center programs, she knew every face and every story. After 2 years of intensive physical therapy, she had regained a significant portion of her leg movement. 3 times a week, she continued her sessions, now more maintenance than rehabilitation. "Grace," Brenda called out, approaching with a clipboard, "the representatives from Chicago have arrived. They want to learn more about our rehabilitation program so they can implement something similar there." Ethan Hayes, who was trimming roses in the garden, a task he continued even after his community service ended, looked up upon hearing the news. His face, older but more peaceful, showed quiet satisfaction. The Phoenix Center's model was expanding, just as they had hoped. "Mom," Harper ran up to her, "can I show them our special presentation, the one about transformation?" Grace smiled, smoothing her daughter's unruly hair. "Of course, honey, but let's let them see the center's basics first." "Can I show my art exhibit afterwards?" Hazel asked softly, clutching her ever-present sketchbook. "I did a new series about how the center changed people's lives." The twins had blossomed over the past 2 years. Harper, with her boundless energy, had become a little ambassador for the center, always ready to guide visitors and share stories of overcoming adversity. Hazel, though more introverted, documented everything through her art, capturing nuances most adults missed. In the meeting room, Grace presented the center's results to the visitors from Chicago. Charts displayed community impact, hundreds of rehabilitated individuals, dozens of children with special needs supported, countless families strengthened. "The secret," she explained, "is that we're not just a rehabilitation center. We're a community of healing, physical, emotional, and social." Ethan, watching discreetly from the doorway, felt his heart tighten. It had been a long journey since that fateful night of the accident. The center, born out of his guilt, had become something much bigger than his personal redemption. During the festival, the Phoenix Center's true magic was on display. On stage, Harper led the choir in a moving performance about second chances and new beginnings. On the walls, Hazel's drawings told stories of transformation, including a particularly touching portrait of her mother at different stages of recovery. "Sometimes it's still hard," Grace confided to Brenda, "watching her daughters, but seeing how they've grown, how they've turned pain into compassion, that makes it all worthwhile." Late in the afternoon, during the closing ceremony, something unexpected happened. Harper invited Ethan to the stage, the first time she'd publicly included him in a performance. "This song," she announced into the microphone, "is about learning that people can change, and that doing good is something we have to practice every day." Hazel joined her sister, holding up her newest drawing. The Phoenix Center seen from above, with tiny points of light spreading to other cities, like stars forming new constellations. Ethan, overwhelmed with emotion, listened to Harper's song as he admired Hazel's drawing. Grace, in her wheelchair, felt tears trickle down her cheeks. The audience, many aware of the center's full history, clapped enthusiastically. "The Phoenix Center is no longer about one person or one story," Grace said into the microphone when the song ended. "It's about how we can transform our hardest experiences into the strength to help others." After the event, in the therapeutic garden, the twins played among the flowers they had helped plant. Harper hummed her new song while Hazel added finishing touches to yet another of her sketches. "Do you think we did it?" Ethan asked Grace, both of them watching the girls. "Turn something so terrible into something good?" Grace pondered for a moment, adjusting her position in her chair. "I think we've learned that life isn't about erasing the past. It's about what we choose to do with our present." On the horizon, the sun set over Seattle, painting the sky with colors right out of Hazel's drawings. The Phoenix Center glowed like a beacon of hope in the city, its programs now being replicated elsewhere, its stories inspiring others to transform their own tragedies into strength for others. Harper and Hazel, growing up amid this reality of triumph and service, had become living symbols of how love can blossom even in the most unlikely soil. Their laughter in the garden proved that sometimes the greatest lessons of compassion come through the eyes of children. "The next center opens in Chicago next month," Ethan said quietly. "They want you there to train the team." Grace smiled, looking at her daughters. "We'll all go. Harper's already planning to teach their choir, and Hazel wants to create an exhibit connecting the two cities." The day ended the way so many others did at the Phoenix Center, with small acts of kindness, appreciative smiles, and the certainty that even in the hardest stories, there's always room for a new beginning. In Hazel's final drawing of the day, the Phoenix Center was no longer just a building. It was a beating heart at the center of the city, sending out waves of hope wherever people needed healing.